how do you even define excellence? And maybe I'll preface that by saying something you also said to me, which I thought was really amazing. You said, because I asked you a similar question when we were in person, and I basically said, you basically said, like, success to me is the fact that my kids, when they tell the people what I do, it's that I'm a volunteer EMT. Is that actually how you would define success, or how do you define entrepreneurial excellence?
I think what I said was that we're very content, but no, that's not how I would necessarily define success. I would say that my definition of success in general is that if I am better today than I was yesterday in any way, a better business person, better negotiator, better father, better friend, whatever it is, if I'm improving, I'm a big believer in the idea of Kaizen, right? The Japanese philosophy of continual change for the good. So if I am improving, then I am being successful.
How do you know as a founder or individual that you are improving, or is it more just of a mentality idea that you are always improving?
So I think it's a mentality. There are definitely ways of measuring some of these things. I think weaving this into the entrepreneurial excellence question is an interesting one, because a lot of times, so one of the things that I've noticed over the years of doing what I do is that more and more I feel like my job is to protect the entrepreneur's team from the entrepreneur's mind. The entrepreneur's mind is a very dangerous place for people who are not in the entrepreneurial spirit. And you can categorize entrepreneurs as a lot of other things that you might see in the mental health manual, basically, right? So ADHD, psychopaths, a lot of CEOs and entrepreneurs are psychopathic in some ways. And a lot of those things make for those people that where other people see problems, entrepreneurs see opportunities, where there is a certain amount of risk that would crush anybody else's soul. Entrepreneurs feel like that's a Tuesday, and that's obviously a good thing because we get really interesting innovations out of that. We get really, hopefully, impactful companies out of that. But on the face of it, like objectively on paper, I feel like a lot of those things are not good things. So it's a really interesting question, right? The entrepreneurial excellence. Like, does that mean you're being really good at being an entrepreneur? Which in some ways, I don't know if that's a good thing. Because again, like, one of the things I would say is an amazing trait of a leader, not necessarily an entrepreneur, but a leader, is when they're able to communicate success very well, empower people in a very good way, and ultimately focus on what they do best and leave the rest to other people in a trusted setting. Entrepreneurs are notoriously bad at that.
They want to micromanage, basically?
Yeah, I mean, they want to micromanage, and a lot of that becomes that the value of them is the value of the company in a way, right? Like, it was my idea, I created it. If I'm not here and I'm not needed and I'm not doing this thing, then what am I? And then they start to take out all sorts of weird things on people, right? The other thing is that we get this thing which I call LIFO leadership. Do you remember, LIFO and FIFO from Accounting 101? Right, so LIFO, last in, first out. Yeah, so you get this thing where an entrepreneur has a great idea, or they go to a conference, or they read a book, and then they go to their team like the next hour and like, this is what we're doing, we're changing everything, and this is what we have to do. And then most of the time the team will shift and do that, right? Because the last thing they heard is the first thing they're going to work on, and then priorities get missed and everybody's pissed off and it just doesn't work. There's an old joke, it's a stupid old joke, but I always like to tell this because I think it gives sort of a good example of what I'm talking about, which is why don't cowboys skydive? Because it scares the crap out of their horses. Right. And so, like, in a lot of situations, the entrepreneur is that cowboy and the team is the workhorse, and they're just sort of like along for the ride blindly. And this doesn't describe every entrepreneur, but it definitely describes a lot. So it's very, very hard from an ego standpoint for someone to start something and then recognize that they're not the person that's going to grow it necessarily, or they're not the person that's going to grow it to $10 million in revenue or beyond that. And the replaceable founder came out of a lot of that, right? The idea is that we want to be as replaceable as possible, which means creating systems and processes that replace what we do well so we can ultimately focus on what we're best at.